Chapter 20. Seclusion, also known as lockup, was a horrible place. It was a cell painted a bilious pinky-purply colour which was supposed to have a calming effect. It didn't. When I finally came out of my induced sleep, I kicked and thumped the door with a previously undiscovered venom, mostly to no avail. There were 2 lock-up cells in Rata, and they were side by side down a corridor which completely separated you from the ward. There was a small lounge down there and a toilet and shower, but these were segregated and any access ways were under lock and key. All attention to the prisoner is entirely at the discretion of the staff. Basically, if you screamed, no one could hear you except for the poor sod in the cell next door. There was a buzzer in the cell, but the nurses would turn off the ringer down in the nurses' station because the locked up rang ceaselessly. The first time I went to Rata, the medical treatment had come as a relief. I'd been so desperate I was grateful for the treatment I received. It had been an incredibly difficult time, but as I began to make progress in recovering from the depression, I could see that it had been for the best. This time was completely different. See, I didn't think there was anything wrong with how I was feeling. In fact, I'd been feeling so good I couldn't stand being compulsorily medicated for it and locked up against my will. The use of seclusion in psychiatric wards is legal in New Zealand when sanctioned by a psychiatrist under the Mental Health Act 1992. But whether it is ethical or not is another question altogether, and one that is hotly debated in psychiatric survivor movements. It is the only time you can legally be forcibly detained against your will unless you have been arrested, are on remand, or a prisoner convicted of a crime. Otherwise it's generally called kidnap. Detention and lockup is literally being made a prisoner when there has been no crime, and many people experience it as extremely frightening and damaging, the treatment far harsher than the condition it is prescribed to treat. As with electric convulsive therapy, these archaic blunt instruments can be used upon a patient without their consent when their only crime has been to experience the full onslaught of mental illness. The continued use of ECT and seclusion is justified by the medical profession because apparently occasionally someone responds well to the treatment. Occasionally. My cell was empty except for a mattress in the corner and a potty, complete with paper bag to put it in when it was full. No, nurses would not answer the buzzer for a toilet break, at least not while I was still furious and liable to hit one of them. Nothing would be issued to me with which I could harm myself or others, which included pens, pencils and my guitar. I was not allowed any visitors. I was in here to obliterate all mental stimulation so that the high could not be fed from without. I hated it. Time stood still. I think I was in that cell for a total of about a week, but it felt like a year. I yelled for company and continued to relentlessly karate kick the door, but it was hard to keep up. I was on a lot of medication. When eventually I'd calmed down, a nurse would appear and let me into the lounge for a cigarette. The staff were no longer my partners in recovery, though. They were now my jailers, and this made them the enemy. It is worth considering that in some countries the experience of sensory deprivation is used as a method of torture. Sometimes when I was being led into the secure lounge for a cigarette, I would look in through the reinforced glass window in the door of the cell next door. In there was Mamie, a recent immigrant from China who spoke very little English. She had her mattress propped up against the wall, and she huddled beneath it in the space created, wrapped in a blanket, looking cowed and terrified. She certainly made it look like torture. I couldn't imagine what she'd done to earn her place in the cell. She seemed timid as a mouse. Sometimes people are put in there after a suicide attempt. I don't know if this was the case with Mamie, but I can't imagine seclusion would help with giving anyone a reason to live. I recently heard of a young man I know who shut himself in a patient phone box inside a hospital mental health unit and refused to come out. After some time, the nursing staff, fearing violence, although he did not have a history of that, called the police to get him out. He lashed out under severe provocation, I might add. The police pepper sprayed pepper sprayed, then electrocuted him with a taser gun. This is in the ward lounge in front of the other patients. He was then put in seclusion and left there for some days to completely freak out. Once a step has been taken of forcibly detaining or coercing treatment upon an unwilling patient, there is often no way back into the therapeutic relationship. The revolving door starts to spin, and the opportunity to achieve positive health outcomes declines simultaneously. I have to believe that there are more enlightened ways to work with people with mental illnesses, and I've come to believe that staff who resort to the kinds of measures described are often practicing a lazy crowd control style of nursing. Sick people deserve better. These situations, which often go unreported and unacknowledged, are a hidden stain on New Zealand's human rights record. I have seen and heard of remarkable examples where an agitated and distressed person will calm down in the presence of an advocate or someone they trust who they perceive as being on their side, like I did with Dr. Harrison. It can be done.